This week on In Post, we're processing a cold, moody shot of the beaches of Davenport, California. Hi everybody, welcome back to In Post. My name is Scott Davenport, and this week I'm back on the beaches of California processing one of the shots I took in Davenport, California this past week. If you saw the In the Field episode, you'll know that this was a very gray evening, not anything happening in the sky, a little bit of texture with some clouds. But I'm going to play that up in the post-processing and just taking that gray, moody, cold feel and use that to create the final image. So let's just jump right over in the machine and get started here. So there's two images that I'm going to work with, and this is the first one. This has almost everything that I want. It's got, nice rocks here. It's got a good wave through here. I love this streaming water coming in, giving a sense of motion. And there's one other image right here. And what I like about this one is this little curl of wave and the fact that these rocks are visible. So I'm going to take these two images and ultimately blend them together. The first thing to do is to do some basic processing on these in Lightroom. You can see from the histogram here that this is very underexposed. Both images are very underexposed. Here's the other one. And again, there's a lot of initial work to do here. So I've done that work already. Let me highlight one of them that has been processed. Here we go. And I will open up this tab and we'll go through the snapshots. The very first thing was lens corrections. So that's just our settings down in here to turn on the profile. If you're wondering why don't I turn on chromatic aberration, if I go to the profile here of the camera itself, for the Sony camera, the A7, it's already using a built-in profile, and the information will tell you this is because it's already applied a chromatic aberration filter to address that. So I've found that I don't need to bother checking this box anymore, and that's good. And that's it for the lens corrections. Moving on to tone and presence. So this is our basic panel. So up here in basic, the main thing here was adjusting the exposure. I went up a full stop and really brought these whites back. I want this water to be white. From there, brought the highlights down a bit. Some of the sky got a little blown out, and just the very tips of some of these waves were a little blown out. Brought the shadows up so I can get some of those textures in the rock here, in particular the group of pelicans here on this back rock. This is actually called Pelican Rock. Brought the whites up, played with the black point. Standard thing I do with this, holding down the Option key and then clicking. You can see as I move the slider back and forth, I'll get a little bit of clipping in the blacks. I tend to like that. I want some pure blacks. Similar idea for the whites. And the final things was boosting clarity, and I also boosted vibrance. Let me show you what vibrance looked like originally. You can see it's a little duller, but having the vibrance there brought out a little more of the blues. Even though I'm going to take this photo in a direction that's not about color, having that initial vibrance there is going to help when I move into black and white, dipping my hand a little bit. The last thing I did in Lightroom was spot healing. I'll click on that one. And this was for a few stray birds that were up in the sky. If I go over here, we can see there was one here, and it's floating through. I mean, this is a little under a second. And so when birds are moving through the sky, they become very blurry. A couple more up on the cliff face. And there was just a tiny bit of, I think it was a tennis ball was on the beach way down here from, it must have been either a previous outing from someone and their dog, or it just washed up on shore that day. So with that, I copied all of these settings and applied them to the second photo as well. You will notice that in the sky here, you can actually see one of those birds there. I did not bother with the spot healing coming over to this second photo, and that's because the only portion of the photo I'm interested in is right down here. And so I could have left the spot healing, copied over. I chose not to bother copying it. It didn't really matter because that portion of the image where I needed to do spot removal is throwaway when I do the blending. So with that, now we've got both images ready to go. We highlight both of them, and then we'll do File, plug in extras, and open them as perfect layers in Perfect Layers 9. So both of these will be in a single document. I can do the blending. So let's get over to Perfect Layers and get that started. So here we have the two images in Perfect Layers, and you can see I've already done some of the masking work. Let me show you how this went. So I'm going to highlight this layer and do Mask, Reset Mask. So now this top image has most everything that I want. The crashing wave, the nice sweeping water, this nice crest through here. The image beneath it has this rock and this curve of water that I want to bring in. So how I did this was I kind of made a mental note about where this is in the image. With the top layer, which has most everything I want in it, I actually reached for the line mask tool. Now, you might be wondering, why line mask? It's really for hard edges, for angles. Well, it is, and it works great for that. But you can also use it for what I'll call arbitrary shapes. You know, this is going to be more or less a triangle, like a wedge that I want to mask away. You play with the feather, you can get some very nice results. So I'm going to crank the feather up really high, you know, like, I don't know, let's say 50. 52 is good enough. One more time I'll check, toggling off my top layer to see where I am. So right about here in the middle of my selected layer, I'm going to go out to this point here and kind of come back down through this area. So turn that layer on. Let me flip on my little cool little cursor thing here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to click once to start the mask, and now I'm just going to kind of click through this area, roughly through there, up to this point there, and once I get to the starting point again, I'll click, and now my cursor turns into this little remove paint can. I'm going to remove that. All right, got a click there. That's not bad. I didn't go in far enough, so I can do another line mask. Let's do it a little more aggressively. Let's get way out into this rock here. Something out there like that. Clicking around until I finish the shape. Again, remove that section, and now we start to see that blending happening. We've got this curve here, we've got this, you know, nice lines there. I'm starting to see some of this rock. I can do a Control M and see where I'm masking. Got an odd artifact here we'll clean up in a minute. And also I didn't go all the way to the edge here. And from here, I reach for the traditional brush. Opacity at 100% is fine, small brush. Bigger feather, so shift right bracket. Just take care of the edge to begin with. And then through this area, you know, maybe just bringing it out here a little bit more and smoothing that out a little bit. Control M. You can start to get the idea. In the end, when I finished the blending, this is what I ended up with. So you can see I did a little bit of work there, and I've done some perfect eraser to take care of this corner of sand here down in the lower left. You know, again, toggling that off, you can see the sand is still here. I use the perfect eraser to fill in that little distraction, a little gap there. So that's the blending. Now let's bring this over into effects for some contrast work, and then finally to finish it off in black and white. All right, so here in effects, you can see the end result, and what I was really after is to give the waves a little more bite, a little more of the local contrast, see those ripples, see those, you know, swirls. The tides were doing, you know, quite interesting things. A very long ebb was slamming up against a incoming tide right here at the base of the beach. So at the very bottom, here is the layer that we brought in from Perfect Layers, the blended two images. First is dynamic contrast. Now this mask looks very intricate, and it was very simple to create. It was nothing more than mask, create luminosity mask. A luminosity mask does effectively takes a black and white rendering of your photo and turns it into a mask. So it's a very quick way to identify shadow areas and identify highlight areas. So in this one here, you can see, if I do Control M, we can see the mask itself. Ooh, that's not coming out very well at all because there's so much of this that is masked away. We'll look at that luminosity mask on the next layer. what I did is the white means that the effect is applied, and black means that it's hidden. You know, if I toggle this on and off, you're not seeing much change except in the cliffs. And this is very subtle. There's not a huge touch to this. This is the natural setting with a significant tweak to the smalls, and these large is not touched, medium is bumped up a little bit. And it's really only affecting the shadowy areas of these cliffs and these rocks. So this is the subtle touch, because the next dynamic contrast layer that I add, which is the inverse mask. So this is a luminosity mask again, but it's being applied to almost everything. And so now, if I look at this mask, you'll see it's just the shadowy areas that have been masked away. And the bulk of this was done with just that simple mask, create luminosity mask. I did do some extra painting right up along the edge of this rock up here, and that was to prevent halos. I didn't want to have any haloing on the top of the rock there, which can happen when you push contrast too far. As for the settings, this is the natural preset. Medium and large have not been touched, and I increased smalls just a little bit to get a little more definition in these fingers of water. The last two layers we have, this adjustable gradient and this noise reduction, those are for the sky. I wanted to darken the sky just a little bit. So that's what the first layer does here, the adjustable gradient. You can see that gets darker just a little bit. Settings-wise, brought the brightness down, and I added a little detail. And that's so these little ripples of clouds, there's just a touch of definition in the sky, so it's not just this bluish gray mass. For the mask, I used an adjustable, or a gradient bug, dropped that down right here on the horizon, very, very thin feather, and then lastly did some brush work just to take the mask off of the cliff. And so we end up with only applied to the sky. Copied that mask and then pasted it down to a noise reduction layer. So once I did the darkening on the adjustable gradient, it added some noise into the sky, and I wanted to remove that. And so applying some noise reduction brought the luminance up a fair amount, and did want to try to keep a little bit of detail, but enough to take the edge off of it. And that's it for effects. I was quite happy with this setting, and now it's to go into black and white and give it that final, grayish, moody, brooding sea feeling. So let's pop over into black and white and finish this up. So here's the image in black and white. Turn the preview back on, and here's the final settings. Now, how did I arrive here? Most of this was experimentation. Where I started was in the presets. So in the presets, I actually went to a Hollywood portrait of all areas. There is this nice one called Ingrid Cool that I really like. So I started with that preset, clicked on it, had it applied to the image, and then began the experimentation. Primarily, I played with the blacks, the shadows, and the whites to suit this image. The preset comes with something pre-canned. I think the blacks were much farther over, as were the whites, and that didn't work. It was blowing out my highlights too much and making too much contrast. I did not change anything with the color response or the tone curve. The glow, I backed off some. I think the preset was somewhere in this neighborhood, and you can see it's not bad, but I'm losing some of the detail that I had added in there, and I wanted to keep that. Toner didn't change. Actually, that's not entirely true. I think I backed off the highlights just a little bit. Vignette, I certainly played with. If you've seen my videos before, you know how I handle vignettes. Lower the brightness, lower the feather, position the vignette, size it, and make the roundness the shape that you like, and then finish things off, making the brightness and the feather suit your tastes. The main thing I did with this that was, I guess maybe the magic, is the opacity. Instead of having it all the way at 100%, this is what the image looked like, much closer to what the preset was. I backed off the opacity, so I'm blending together some black and white effect with the image that came out of Perfect Effects, this image here. And so this is where that vibrant setting helped out, giving those more turquoise blues of the afternoon and the evening, and having a little bit of that poke through in the black and white image. And I just settled on 70% after experimenting. So that is the final image. So tip of the week is experiment, play. I did not know where I was going to go with this image. I thought black and white because there wasn't a lot of color, and it turned out playing with vibrance, boosting things up a little bit. That helped when I did the blending with black and white, and also not doing entirely black and white. It's it kind of has almost a split tone feel to it with the 70% application of this black and white. So experiment, play, have fun when you're processing photos. That is it for this week in post. I am looking forward to getting out of what's really turning into a very hot studio. It's been a really hot day in San Diego. I got lights on. They are starting to cook me here. So I'm getting out of here. And if you have questions, go ahead and hit me up through my website. I'd be happy to answer anything that you throw at me to the best of my ability. In the meantime, have fun shooting, and I'll see you again soon.